Welcome back. Today we're going to continue studying phonetics. Last time we learned about the phonetics of consonants. Today we're going to wrap up consonants and we're going to start studying the phonetics of vowels. So here's where we're at so far. We've learned that speech sounds are called phones. Speech consists of a series of phones that you produce. You produce a sequence of phones, the individual speech sounds. Phones can be written in a rigorous way using a phonetic alphabet. A phonetic alphabet is an alphabet consisting of phonetic symbols, where each symbol is in a one-to-one correspondence with a phone, with a different kind of phone. Phones can be analyzed into phonetic features. For consonants, the phonetic features are place of articulation, manner of articulation, and voicing. So if you need to describe a consonant, all you need to specify is these three pieces of information: the place of articulation, the manner of articulation, and the voicing. We saw that the features of a consonant can be read off of the International Phonetic Alphabet chart. The chart is arranged in such a way where the columns correspond to the places of articulation, the rows correspond to manners of articulation, and the phones are all written in pairs of unvoiced and voiced. The places of articulation that are used in American English are bilabial, with the two lips, labiodental, with the lips and teeth, dental, which is the tongue against the teeth, alveolar, postalveolar, and velar. Alveolar is touching the alveolar ridge at the top front of your mouth. Postalveolar is just behind that. The velar consonants are touching the soft palate, the soft area that's behind your hard palate. You touch that with the back of your tongue. And the manners of articulation that we have in American English are plosive or stop, fricative, nasal, tap. Remember, we have tap in words like kitty, approximant, and lateral approximant. And we also covered some places of articulation and some manners of articulation that exist in languages other than English. Note that this term approximant in your textbook is also called a glide or a liquid, and you'll also see that in other stuff about linguistics. So here's the International Phonetic Alphabet as we've studied it so far. All the consonants that we've studied so far. These are actually all the pulmonic consonants, which means these are all the sounds that you make using air coming out of your lungs. Later in this class, we're going to look at consonant sounds you make using air that comes from other sources. We're going to get to that quite soon. But I'd like to just review how we read this chart, how we can read features off of this chart. So let's just highlight a particular phone here, the phone that's spelled with the letter T in the International Phonetic Alphabet. So I'd like you to try to describe this phone to me in terms of its phonetic features. All right, so the first thing we ask is it voiced or unvoiced? And you could just look at the chart and notice that it's the left one in the pair. That means it's unvoiced. Or you could try to enunciate the sound and check for yourself. Is your larynx vibrating when you say the sound t, t, t? It's not, and that means it's unvoiced. When the larynx is not vibrating, that means it's unvoiced. When the larynx is vibrating, that means it's voiced. So t is unvoiced. Next you ask, what is its place of articulation? What is your tongue doing when you say t? Notice the tip of your tongue, t, is touching the alveolar ridge at the front, so it is an unvoiced alveolar. And what's the manner of articulation? You could just read it off the chart, or you could think about it. T. It creates a complete blockage. T, which is suddenly released, so it's a stop. So it is an unvoiced alveolar stop or an unvoiced alveolar plosive. How about this? The thing that is spelled with the International Phonetic Alphabet letter C. What is this sound? This is something you don't have in English. You might speak a language that has this. So what is this? It is ka. It's unvoiced. You can read that off the chart because it's the left member of the pair. It's palatal. You can read that from the column, and it's a stop. that's a little set of instructions for how to pronounce it. So I could point to any point in this chart and ask, how would you pronounce that? And you should be able to pronounce it, even if it's a sound you've never pronounced before in your life, even if it's a sound that doesn't exist in any language you speak, and maybe doesn't even exist in any human language. I can point to any point in this chart and you should be able to pronounce it just based on the features. So in this case, it's unvoiced, it's palatal, it's a stop. You know how to articulate a palatal consonant. We covered that. You move your tongue directly up, flat against the roof of your mouth. Ka, ka. That's the unvoiced palatal stop. Now, how about this? I said I could point to any point in the chart and you should be able to pronounce it. Well, I've pointed to something here. There's no symbol there, but you should still be able to figure out what consonant would be there, what the features of that consonant would be. So it's to the left of the N, so it's part of one of these pairs, so it must be unvoiced, right? And it is alveolar, so it involves the tip of the tongue on the alveolar ridge, and it is nasal. Anyone want to try to pronounce this? You should, as you're following along at home, just try to pronounce this. This is going to be an unvoiced alveolar nasal. So it's going to be like the voiced alveolar nasal, na, na, but you want to pronounce it unvoiced in the same way that ta and sa are unvoiced. Just try it, and then I'll demonstrate it to you. So, na. This is going to be an unvoiced alveolar nasal, na. This is a consonant that does exist in some languages. For example, the Burmese language does have this sound na, an unvoiced nasal, an unvoiced alveolar nasal. And if we wanted to give a symbol to this, we can do it this way. So in the International Phonetic Alphabet, in addition to having these symbols, you also have these little marks, which are called diacritics, which you can apply to the symbols to modify them. In this case, putting the little circle under the N, indicates that you have an unvoiced consonant. It takes a symbol, and when you draw the little ring under the symbol, that means that it is going to be the unvoiced version of that symbol. In this case, the unvoiced alveolar nasal is going to be N with the ring under it. That's the sound na. This also shows up in the Icelandic language. In the Icelandic language, the word for water is vat, with an unvoiced alveolar nasal at the end. See if you can hear it. Vat. How about this? What would this be? This would be an unvoiced alveolar lateral approximant. So the voiced alveolar lateral approximant is what's spelled with the IPA symbol L. That's going to be the sound la. Try to produce that, but now unvoiced, and you get la, la, an unvoiced alveolar lateral approximant. There are, again, languages that have this. And you would write it as L with the circle under it. How about these consonants? What would these be? Think about what these would be and try to pronounce them. So we have that they are stops, they're plosives, they're labiodental, so they have the same place of articulation as F and V, but they're stops, they're plosives. So now try to pronounce something like an F or a V, the sound fa or a va, but as a stop rather than as a fricative. So that would be pa and ba, pa and ba. These would be voiced and unvoiced labiodental stops. If you wanted to write these sounds in the IPA, again, you can use these diacritics. You can use these special marks. In this case, there's a special mark, which is this little sort of tooth-like looking thing that you put under a consonant. And that means that whatever it is, it's made dental. So in this case, you're taking the P symbol or the B symbol, which stand for the bilabial consonants, and you're making them dental, so it's labiodental. These sounds would be pa and ba. So this shows how the IPA not only gives us a set of symbols for various different consonant sounds that could exist, it also gives us a system for writing, for coming up with new symbols for any possible consonant sound using these special marks called diacritics. Now, just to expand your consciousness a bit, we're going to look at other kinds of consonants. we'll start looking at consonants that are beyond the plain consonants, the pulmonic consonants that we've looked at so far. So I'm now showing you a bigger part of the standard International Phonetic Alphabet chart, and you can see there's a lot of other various consonants here of various kinds, and you can now read the descriptions of these things and get some sense of what they are. First thing to note is that the English sound w, the consonant w, spelled with a W in English, is down under other symbols. It's listed as a voiced labial velar approximant. So what is that? The labial velar approximant means that you have constriction both with the two lips, so that's a bilabial approximant, and also towards the back of the mouth in the same place of articulation that you would pronounce the consonants k and g. You constrict both of those simultaneously, so it's labial velar, and you get wah, wah, wah. So that's why W is down sort of in this odd part of the chart. It doesn't really fit in the top part of the chart because it has two places of articulation, not just one. And there are other various consonants you can see down here that are used in other languages that have this sort of dual place of articulation. Like there's a voiced labial palatal approximant, that's ya. And you have the epiglottals. You have simultaneous sh and h. This is a consonant that exists in Swedish. Word for C in Swedish is sh, with this special consonant here. That is, this thing at the bottom is just sort of miscellaneous consonants that they couldn't fit into the chart any place on the top. I'd like to also draw your attention to this box. This box has a bunch of really fun and interesting consonants. These are the consonants that are non-pulmonic. So these are consonants that are not articulated using air coming out of your lungs. They're articulated in some other way. So let's go through them. They're pretty interesting. We'll start with the ejectives on the right here. Ejectives are formed by constricting your glottis, constricting your vocal cords, and then moving it up, or moving it down rather, in order to create some extra pressure, which is then released at the glottis. And the result is a sort of consonant sound that seems to sort of pop out of your mouth using air that is expelled from your glottis rather than from your lungs. And so what these sound like is ta, pa, ka, sa. That's what the ejective sounds like. Ejective sounds are quite common across languages. So you can find ejectives in very prominently in the Amharic language, the main language spoken in Ethiopia, which I believe the term for Ethiopia in Amharic is Ethiopia with an ejective P. Next, going towards the left is voiced implosives. These, again, are fun and interesting, and you can try to pronounce these at home. To pronounce these are pronounced using air which is being sucked in instead of air which is being pushed out. So, for example, the bilabial implosive is ba, ba. Try to say a B, but while breathing in instead of while breathing out, and you get ba, ba. And also da, la, ga, and la. Those are the voiced implosives. Very common consonant sounds in West Africa and some areas of India and Pakistan. So that's fun. And then maybe the most interesting and the most unusual consonant sounds that you're going to encounter are the clicks. The clicks are, there are languages that include clicks as sounds. There are phones in the language which are clicks. So the bilabial click is the one on top. That would be. A click is formed by creating a constriction of air either using your velum or using your uvula, and then moving it around to create pressure and then releasing it. So the source of the air there is not your lungs. It's actually coming from inside your mouth when you make a sound like the bilabial click. Then we have dental clicks. The post-alveolar click, palatal alveolar click is kind of like popping a cork of champagne. And the alveolar lateral click is, which is a click that I believe has some use in horse riding, but it also is a phone. It's a phone. It's a sound in some languages. For example, in the language which is spelled X-H-O-S-A, the name of the language is spelled X-H-O-S-A, and it's pronounced Xhosa with a palatoalveolar click. And so these are the click sounds. And the languages that have these click sounds are primarily concentrated in Southern Africa. So now that we've covered consonants, I'm going to show you this video again, this video of articulation. And you're going to be able to follow along, you're going to be able to see, and you're going to be able to actually deduce what consonants this guy is producing. So let's take a look. I'll just play this again. I'll tell you the first consonant is bilabial. Take a look. It's actually an M. So do you see the M there? So look for bilabial consonants. You can see that there's several, so that's P, B, and M. Look at how the tongue is moving. You can see how it is touching the alveolar ridge in many cases. Look at the action of the uvula and the velum at the back front of the mouth. That's the thing that's sort of hanging in between the oral cavity and the nasal cavity here. That thing, notice when it's pulled back, that means the air is going to be going through the oral cavity. When it's pushed forward, that means the air is going to be going through the nasal cavity, and that means that you'll have nasal consonants. So if you watch this slowly, you can actually figure out what consonants this guy is saying just by looking at how his mouth is moving. It's pretty cool. So that's enough of consonants. You now have a very good understanding of how consonants work phonetically. And we're going to move on to vowels. We defined consonants as sounds that involve constriction of the vocal tract to impede airflow. So in stops, we impeded airflow by completely blocking it. In fricatives, we impeded airflow by creating friction. In approximants, we impeded airflow simply by constricting enough to create some impedance. Now we'll look at vowels. Vowels are sounds that allow the air to flow freely through the oral cavity or the nasal cavity. Now, in English, we use these 6 different letters, A, E, I, O, and U, to indicate vowels. And so you might think, what is a vowel? Well, it's one of these 5 or 6 letters. But remember, this is just an aspect of the English spelling system. These do not indicate phonetic vowels. These are just certain symbols that we write in the visual written form of the English language. So you shouldn't think of vowels as consisting of these 5 symbols. In fact, in English there are at least 10 vowel phones, 10 distinct vowel phones that we use in the English language. And they are E, E, U, O, A, and E. We're about to cover them in more detail. So remember, with consonants, we classified consonants, we described consonants using 3 features. They were the place of articulation, the manner of articulation, and the voicing. If I give you the place, manner, and voicing of any consonant, then you know how to produce that consonant. Vowels are different. Vowels have a different set, again, of 3 features. The features that define vowels are tongue height, tongue position, and lip rounding. So here's the International Phonetic Alphabet chart, and here's where the vowels fit in. Let's take a closer look. So the y-axis here indicates the vowel height, the tongue height. In this case, they're indicated in terms of open being the one at the bottom and close being the one at the top. And on the x-axis here, we have the tongue position, which ranges from front, which means the tongue is towards the front of the mouth, and back, which means the tongue is towards the back of the mouth. One thing to note about vowels is that they exist in a continuous space. So when we were talking about consonants, they were discrete. A particular consonant sound is either a t or a k, and there's not really anything in between those. You can't smoothly transition from a t to a k because they're just very different tongue movements, right? Those are discrete. Consonants are discrete. Vowels, on the other hand, exist in a continuous space. You can move your tongue around continuously in a continuously variable way from one vowel sound to another. So just say ah and try moving your tongue around. I, we, you'll see that you're moving around continuously in this space of different vowels. So the tongue height and the tongue position define a continuous space of vowels. Vowels exist in a continuous space. And these symbols now indicate not an exact articulation of a vowel, but they indicate a sort of approximate position in that vowel space. So like the I symbol here, that means sort of the most front and close that you can get. That's a corner of the space. The other symbols sort of approximately indicate a position in this continuous space. These are the vowel symbols that are used in English. And so they span a pretty big part of the space. And we'll be taking a look at these, and then we'll start looking at the vowels that exist in other languages and how you can use the features of vowels to imagine new vowels that you might never have heard of before. So now here we have a chart just of the American English vowels. So as I said, the y-axis here rather is tongue height. This is how high your tongue is when you are articulating a vowel. The x-axis is tongue position. That's how far to the front or back the tongue is when you are articulating a vowel. Notice that on this chart, the top of the tongue height axis is called high, and the bottom is called low. That's a bit of variation in terms of like what textbooks you're looking at. Sometimes the top of this is called high, sometimes it's called close, sometimes the bottom is called low, sometimes it's called open. I tend to prefer high and low, but you can use whichever one you want. This chart corresponds to the actual sort of coordinates of where your tongue is when you are pronouncing a vowel. So let's go through them. The first vowel I'd like to talk about is what's indicated with the IPA letter I. So that is the sound E, as in the English word beat. When you say E, I'd like you all to say E out loud. You can feel a few things. E, you can feel that your tongue is very close to the top of your mouth. E, your tongue is very high up in your mouth, very close to the top. E. And you can also feel that the tip of your tongue is quite far forward. It's almost touching the alveolar ridge even. Like if you're saying E and you just move your tongue forward a little bit, E, it turns into an S touching the alveolar ridge. So this is a high front vowel, E. And then the vowel sound I, indicated with this sort of I without a dot on it in the International Phonetic Alphabet, the small caps I here. This is I, I. This is like E, but you've just relaxed your tongue a bit. You've just moved your tongue in towards the middle a little bit from the E. So you have I, I, I. We call this lax. So in English, in order to describe where the vowels live in English, in this vowel space, we introduce this distinction between tense and lax vowels. A tense vowel is sort of farther out, and your tongue is more tense while you're saying it. A lax vowel is just a little bit farther in the vowel space, and your tongue's a little bit more relaxed. So E is the high front tense vowel in English. I is the high front lax vowel in English, which just means your tongue's a little bit more relaxed when you're saying I as opposed to E. Now going down, we have this vowel indicated with the Greek letter epsilon. So we have E. This is the vowel sound in a word like bet, bet. This is lax. So it's, again, your tongue is somewhat relaxed when you're saying that. When you're saying and I, you can feel that your tongue is sort of relaxed. When you say E, it's a bit more tense. So is the mid-front lax vowel in English. And then going down further, we get to this AE ligature symbol that indicates the sound A, as in bat or cat. That's the English A sound. That symbol is sometimes called ash, and so the ash indicates the sound A. That's a low front lax vowel. A. And as you say A, you can feel your tongue's a lot lower than when you say a high vowel like E. So you try saying e, a. You can even see this. When you have a, the tongue is very low, or it's very open. Your mouth is very open. And when you say e, then your tongue is very high, and your mouth is very close, very closed. So the tongue's very close to the top of your mouth, rather. So those are the front vowels in English, going from e down to a. And notice that you can do that continuously. You can just slowly lower your mouth and go yeah, and move continuously through this vowel space. Now, let's look at the back vowels. So the first back vowel is the high back vowel, which is oo, spelled with the International Phonetic Alphabet symbol U. So we have oo as in boot. The English word boot has a high back tense vowel, oo. It's tense because it's far out in the space. It's toward the edge of the space. The oo also has a feature that we call lip rounding. So notice that in this chart, there's a little box that says round that indicates the vowels that have what's called lip rounding. Lip rounding means that as you are articulating a vowel, you're rounding your lips. So when you say oo, you can feel, you can see, oo, that you're rounding your lips. When you say something like e, you can feel and you can see you're not rounding your lips. E is unrounded, oo is rounded. So oo, that vowel, that is the high back rounded tense vowel in English. So its features are high, back, rounded, tense. Its lax pair, its lax cousin here, is the vowel as in foot or book. It's the same thing as oo, but just moved in a little bit, so it is lax. And again, it's rounded. You have book. Notice that when you say book or foot, your lip is rounded. Then going down, we have the vowel aw, as in bought. Bought, I bought a book. When you say aw, you have the lip rounding, aw. And then below that, we have the vowel ah, as in cot, like I slept on a cot. This is not rounded. So this is a low back, lax, unrounded vowel, cot. Now, interestingly, if you grew up on the West Coast, if you grew up in California, these vowels aw and ah are going to sound the same to you. So in more Eastern dialects of American English, there's a distinction between the sound aw, which is rounded, and the sound ah, which is unrounded. For example, in many dialects in more eastern areas of the United States, when you caught a ball, that is a different vowel than when you slept on a cot. Caught and cot are different sounds in those dialects, but on the West Coast, they're both pronounced cot. So you're not on the hook for knowing this distinction between aw and ah in English because you might speak a dialect where that distinction is not made. But it does exist in other varieties of American English. And in fact, when you go to, say, English as spoken in the UK, then there's even more vowel distinctions that are made, which are not preserved in American English dialects. So those are the back vowels. And we saw that back vowels often come along with this extra feature of rounding, of lip rounding. Now let's think about the tongue position. We're going to think about vowels now on the x-axis. How far forward is your tongue? How far back is your tongue? Notice that when we say E, it's towards the front of your mouth. E, your tongue is sort of curled up close to the alveolar ridge. E, towards the front of the mouth. When you say oo, then your tongue is towards the back of your mouth. So say E, oo, E, oo. Feel how when you say E, your tongue is toward the front. When you say oo, your tongue is toward the back. And then at the bottom of the space, the low front lax unrounded vowel in English is a. So say a. And the low back unrounded lax vowel in English is ah, as in cot. So try saying ah. You can feel how when you say ah, your tongue is more front. When you say ah, your tongue is more back. There's also some vowels that are in the middle here in terms of the tongue position and the tongue height. So most prominently we have this one. This is this weird upside down V in IPA. This is the vowel in run, spelled with the letter U in English. So run, if you feel where that vowel is in your mouth, it's quite lax. Its tongue height is mid, it's in the middle. Its tongue position is central, it's just in the middle of the vowel space. You're just saying you're not really applying much tension in your tongue to say this, it's very central. And then there's also this sound indicated with the upside down E here. This sound is called schwa, and this is the most sort of mid-central vowel you can have. This is the vowel whose articulation requires the least effort. So that's going to be the first vowel in something like about, about. That's the in about, about. And it can be a bit hard to hear the difference between the in run and the in about. The in about is just a bit higher. The schwa is just a bit higher than the sound. This is an example of how the vowel space is continuous. If you really want to specify a vowel with complete precision, you'd have to give like a numerical coordinate in this space. But that can get a bit cumbersome. So we use these symbols as sort of shorthand approximations of an approximate location in this space. So is just a little bit higher and a little bit laxer than in English. And we have this tense lax distinction in English. You can again feel this if you look at the tense lax pairs in the language, E versus I and U versus The E sound is the same thing as the I sound, but it's just sort of farther out with more tongue tension. A tense vowel is pronounced with a sort of more extreme tongue position than a lax vowel. That's going to be the E in beat versus the I in bit. So say E, I. You can feel the tense lax distinction in your mouth there. And U, between food and foot, food, foot. Same vowel, but the is a bit laxer. Now this roundedness feature is interesting. All vowels can be rounded or unrounded. We saw that in English, it's the high back vowels and the mid back vowels that are rounded, and the rest of them are unrounded. But in other languages, all of these different vowels might be either rounded or unrounded. A vowel is rounded if it's pronounced with rounding of the lips. So U versus E, U versus E. U has the lip rounding, E does not. Your mouth is spread out when you say E. So E we would describe as a high front unrounded vowel. You might even specify that further. For the special case of English, you would say it's a high front unrounded tense vowel, E. And U is the high back rounded vowel. Now what would this be? On the International Phonetic Alphabet chart, the symbols for vowels are given in unrounded, rounded pairs. So E is the unrounded one, and the Y there would spell the rounded version of that same vowel. So let's see if we can pronounce this. You might speak a language that has this already, actually. So the Y spells a high front rounded vowel. So in terms of what your tongue is doing, it's going to be the same thing as E. But in terms of what your lips are doing, it's going to be rounded just like U. So to try to pronounce this, what you need to do is try to pronounce an E using your tongue on the inside of your mouth, E, while rounding your lips as if you're saying U on the outside. So E on the inside, U on the outside. Let's try it. E, do you hear that? U. That's the high front rounded vowel spelled with a Y. And this is really common across languages. For example, in French, the word for you, that's the second person when you're talking to someone familiar, you call them du, spelled T-U. Similarly, in German, the word for cool in German, like when the temperature is cool, is kühl, with a high front rounded vowel. In Mandarin Chinese, words like lu and chu, which mean green and the verb to go, those again have the high front rounded vowel U. This is often spelled in different languages as a U with dots over it. Sometimes it's also spelled with a Y in some languages. In fact, this Y comes from the fact that in the Greek language, the letter upsilon, which looked like a Y, spelled this sound. We can also take a vowel which you are probably more familiar with in its rounded form, U, and try to unround it. So this thing here, this upside down M, that indicates a high back unrounded vowel. So the way to pronounce this is to try to say U on the inside of your mouth while saying E with your lips. So your tongue is going to be positioned as if it's pronouncing U, 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 but your lips are going to be positioned as if you're saying E. What you get is E, 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 E. There it is. So if you take a actual class in phonetics, then there will probably be part of the class where you take a test, where someone just gives you a list of these symbols and you have to pronounce them, and then you're going to be graded based on how well you can pronounce them. Anyway, I've always had trouble with the high back unrounded vowel. So if you can pronounce it, then I'm impressed. Or you might already speak a language that has it then. So for example, in Korean, the verb to drink is and that has a high back unrounded vowel. Similarly, Turkish has this sound in this word here, which is spelled S, I without a dot, and then G with a thing on top of it. You have su, the high back unrounded vowel. There's also all kinds of other interesting sort of front rounded vowels. There's the O with a cross through it. That is in fact the sound which is spelled by that symbol in, say, Norwegian and Danish. That would be a mid-front rounded vowel. So that's going to be like the E there spells this vowel sound A, and it's going to be A on the inside but with rounding, and so you get E. Examples would be like the French word feu. You also can have vowels whose tongue position is central, so it's halfway between front and back. In this case, this would be a high central tense vowel, or unrounded also. So that would be a high central unrounded vowel, I with a line through it. To pronounce that, you have to imagine starting with E, and then sort of start to move your tongue back towards where you would pronounce U, and stop about halfway. So the sound is that's a high central vowel. And again, we have this in languages. So in the Russian language, the word for you is t with a high central vowel. Now, vowels can have a lot of other features. These features of tongue height, tongue position, and rounding are the three main features. You've seen that in English, there's this sort of additional feature of tense versus lax. There's also other features you could apply. So all the vowels we've looked at so far have been voiced. When you say a, e, I, o, u, you have your larynx vibrating. They're clearly voiced sounds. You could unvoice them. You could have languages where, say, the sound ah, an unvoiced ah is a vowel of the language. For example, in Japanese. In Japanese, the word for person is hito, 2 syllables, hito. The first vowel there is actually an unvoiced, high, front, unrounded vowel. So that's E, but unvoiced. It's like it's whispered. So it's hito. Similarly, the verb arimasu, the last syllable there has an unvoiced, high, back vowel, unrounded. You can also have nasal vowels. So you can move your velum forward to allow air to go through the nasal cavity as you're articulating a vowel. These are indicated using a tilde over the vowel in the International Phonetic Alphabet. So these are e, and For example, French famously has these sounds, the French word bon. Vowels can also have a lot of other interesting features. They can have things like compacted lips, that's like a different form of lip rounding. They can have creaky voice. That's when you are, this is what's commonly called vocal fry, although vocal fry is not really a technical term in linguistics. The technical term is creaky voice. This is a sound like is called creaky voice. That's a feature that a vowel can have. You could have a like high front creaky vowel that would be E, something like that. You also have breathy voice and so on, all kinds of interesting features vowels can have. Now, the vowels I've talked about so far are all single vowel sounds. Remember, the space of possible vowels is a continuous space, and the vowels I've talked about so far all just involve some point in that space. You find some point in that space, you move your tongue there, and you just hold it. You produce a sound like E or Oo. It's the same sound. Those are what are called monophthongs. A monophthong is a vowel that's produced in only one part of the mouth. You can also have a vowel sound called a diphthong. Remember, I gave you some demos that you can actually move through the vowel space continuously. Well, you could actually have a vowel sound in a language that consists of starting in one place and then sliding to another place. So for example, I could have a vowel sound that starts with ah, and then it moves continuously up towards E. So it starts in the low back unrounded vowel, and it ends in the high front unrounded vowel. So we would get I. So you see that that is actually a sound you might be familiar with. English has this sound I. It's a diphthong, which starts with ah and it ends with E. So diphthongs are written in the International Phonetic Alphabet simply as a pair of vowel symbols, the first and then the second. Examples would be things like I. So the actual diphthong in English actually starts with the low front vowel ah, and then it goes up to E. So we have diphthongs like I as in fight, bite, I'll. As you say I, you can feel that what's going on is really just that your tongue is going up. It's always front. It's really just going up in terms of its tongue height. I. Another important diphthong in English is this one A, which starts with the mid-front vowel A, and it goes up to the high front vowel E, and you get A, as in fate, mate, hay. You also have vowels that start at the back and move towards the front. So the oi in boy and boil, that starts with the mid-back rounded vowel, o, and it goes forward to the high front unrounded lax vowel I, and so you have oi from the back to the front, and also from mid to high, oi. So these are all diphthongs that start basically low and then they end up going higher, or they also start more back and they end up going more front. We can also look at the vowels that go backwards instead of going forwards. So these are going to be the things like ow, as in mouse. So you start with ah, which is the low front tense vowel, ah, and then you go up and back to which is the high back rounded lax vowel, as in foot. So you start with ah, go to you get mouse. Ow, mouse, and doubt. These are diphthongs. You can also start with o, which is the sort of high, mid, back tense vowel o, rounded, and then that goes up a bit to and you get grow, toad, code, another diphthong. So in English, to sum up, we've identified 10 monophthong vowels, e, o, a, and e. And we've identified 5 diphthongs, I, a, oi, ow, and o. Those are the actual vowels of English. Don't let anyone tell you English has 5 vowels. It's actually got at least 15 distinct vowel sounds, 10 monophthongs, and at least 5 diphthongs. So let's practice using the chart. How would you describe this vowel? What is this? First of all, is it high or low? Well, it's high. Second of all, is it front or back? Well, it's back. Third of all, is it rounded or unrounded? Remember, the thing on the left is unrounded, the thing on the right is rounded. So this is rounded. It's a high back rounded vowel. U. How about this one? This is again high. It's again back. It's again, well, it's rounded. It's not written in a pair here, but you should know that this symbol here means a rounded vowel, as in foot. So this is a high back rounded lax vowel in English. So lax just means it's just sort of in a little bit in the vowel space. This one, so try to pronounce it. You can either look at the features or you can remember how it's pronounced. You see that it is a low front, unrounded, lax vowel. So you get a in English. How about this one? This is one we haven't talked about, but based on the vowel features we've learned about, you should know what this is and you should know how to pronounce it. So, well, it's high, it's central, and it's rounded. So we've practiced the high central unrounded vowel, which is I. Just round it. I. You get the vowel I.